Bismillah, I would love Sheikh. So, Sheikh Kamil Ahmad, I'm just going to give brief introduction. MashaAllah, the Sheikh graduated from Medina University, and he is, MashaAllah, he did his master's in Qasim University. And the Sheikh is from Pakistan, but he has been Imam in Canada in one of the biggest masjid, Abu Hurairah. Sorry, that was my son playing it back. So the Sheikh was Imam in Abu Huraira Center, and now he's one Imam in Canada now, and he's doing, mashallah, many courses. We just completed a course with him, myself, on Aqidah Hamawiya, but he has done previously other courses on Kaf Shubuhat. So mashallah, he's an excellent Sheikh, from which we're very honored for the Sheikh to give us some time today to talk about the Aqidah, the biography and the Aqidah of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Now there's the World Cup. We all, I mean, our kids watch Ronaldo, Messi, but we need to know about the real heroes as well of the Ummah. So without any further ado, I will ask Sheikh Kamil to start his talk. Jazakumullah khair. For all question and answers, brothers, please, at the end of the talk, if you write them down, and at the end, you can ask them directly to the Sheikh. So without any further ado, I will ask the Sheikh to start, and all the brothers to unmute themselves.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام الأتمان الأكملان على خير خلق الله أجمعين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا وأرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه واجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه آمين. وبعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our brother Ali for arranging this session, and the brothers, the Masjid Al-Ikhlas, Jazakumullahu khairan, for hosting me today. Today we are going to talk about the life of one of the great figures and one of the great leading imams and scholars of this ummah. And he is none other than Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. If I can just ask Brother Ali to allow me to share the screen. I just have a few slides that I'm going to share, inshallah. So we're going to go through the life of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and the major event in his life, his trial, the mihna that he went through. And after that, we are going to, inshallah ta'ala, after that, we are going to go through his aqidah very briefly. What was his aqidah concerning the attributes of Allah? What was his aqidah and his position concerning the sifat, the attributes of Allah? And the reason why we're going to focus on that is because there are people nowadays who are claiming that the Imam's position was something that it really was not. So we need to clarify exactly what was the position of Imam Ahmad concerning concerning the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Um, I still cannot share the slides for some reason. It's not giving me the option to share the PowerPoint.
I made you host, Sheikh, so try now.
Okay. Okay. Okay, now we got it. All right, so let's start, inshallah ta'ala, on the life of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. His full name was Imam Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal ibn Hilal ibn Asad ibn Idris ibn Abdullah ibn Hayyan. And so the Imam, he came from a pure Arab family. Unlike many of the other great scholars of that time, especially scholars of Hadith, who were non-Arabs, as we know, the likes of Imam al-Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Abu Dawood, An-Nasa'i, At-Tirmidhi, etc. They were from Khurasan, and Imam al-Bukhari was from Bukhara. As for Imam Ahmad, he came from a pure Arab family. His father was from the Duhali tribe, and his mother came from the Shaybani family. Both of these two families are pure Arab families. In fact, the scholars, they trace back the lineage of Imam Ahmad to Quraysh. His family, they come from Basra in Iraq. However, it was his grandfather, the grandfather of Imam Ahmad, and his name was Hanbal. So we mentioned his name was Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal. Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal. So his grandfather Hanbal had left Basra for Khurasan, which is basically modern day Iran and Afghanistan. So his father had left for Khurasan to become a governor of the city of Sarkhas. And this was under the Umayyad Khilafah, Bani Umayyah. However, this was towards the end of the Umayyad Khilafah, when a revolution, we could say kind of like a revolution, had been started. And basically, this was the Abbasi revolution. And so the Abbasis were trying to gain power now. And his grandfather joined those protests and joined that revolution. As a result, his father was killed by Bani Umayyah. That was his grandfather. As for his father, Muhammad, he was an officer, a soldier in the Abbasid army. So now the Abbasi Khilafah had started, and his father was part of the Abbasi army, situated in the city of Maru. Maru also being in Khurasan. So this is a little bit about his family background. Now his mother, she conceived the Imam while she was in Khurasan. And so she was pregnant with the Imam and she traveled to Baghdad. She traveled to Baghdad where she stayed and she gave birth to Imam Ahmad in Baghdad. So he was born in Baghdad in the year 164. In the year 164 of the Hijrah, which corresponds to approximately 780. While the Imam was young, his father passed away. His father passed away while he was also young. His father was in his 30s. And Imam Ahmad speaks about this himself. He says, I was brought from Khurasan while still a baby in the womb of my mother. And she gave birth to me here, meaning in Baghdad. So I never saw my grandfather nor my father. So I never saw my grandfather nor my father. So the Imam ended up as an orphan, as a yatim, and he was brought up by his mother in the bustling city of Baghdad. In those days, Baghdad was known as a hub of knowledge, filled with scholars from all fields of knowledge. And so it was here that the Imam mastered the various Islamic sciences from a very young age. And he was known for his intelligence. He was also known for his very noble manners, his akhlaq. And so growing up in Baghdad, he was in the company of the great scholars of the Ummah of that time. And so one of his main teachers growing up in Baghdad was none other than the student of Imam Abu Hanifa, and that is Abu Yusuf. However, the methodology of Abu Yusuf was that of Ar-Ra'i, which is basically uh, heavy emphasis on qiyas. Heavy emphasis on qiyas. And so the Imam started to lean more towards the study of hadith. And so this is why he ended up studying under one of the leading scholars of hadith in Baghdad by the name of Hashim ibn Bashir al-Wasiti. Hashim ibn Bashir al-Wasiti. Until that scholar passed away, while Imam Ahmad was around the age of 20. So now Imam Ahmad is a grown man. He is a very strong student of knowledge. I mean, in today's day, if he was here, he would be considered a scholar at that age, at the age of 20. But he did not stop his seeking of knowledge at that time. Rather, a few years later, he decided to devote himself to collecting ahadith. So in those days, the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ were not compiled in books. There were a few books like the Muwatta of Imam Malik, but imagine this is the time of the great scholars of hadith, the likes of Imam al-Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Abu Dawood, and so on and so forth. So the books of these scholars were not compiled yet. And so in those days, the way to become a master in the field, in the science of hadith, was to go to narrators who narrate hadith and memorize from them. Have them to narrate to you the hadith that they have, and you sit down and you memorize those hadith with their chains, with their chains going all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Imam Ahmad decided to travel for this purpose. So his journey began in the year 186. And so he traveled to Basra, he traveled to Al-Hijaz, Mecca and Medina, he traveled to Yemen and Al-Kufa. So these were the centers of knowledge where there were great scholars of hadith who would narrate a hadith. And so he traveled to basically collect all of these ahadith. Now, one of the prominent places that Imam Ahmad traveled to was Hijaz. He went there 5 times, and it was there that he met Imam al-Shafi'i. It was there that he met Imam al-Shafi'i. And so he learned from Imam al-Shafi'i. He learned from him his usul and his fiqh. And later on, he met Imam al-Shafi'i again when Imam al-Shafi'i came to Baghdad. In total, Imam Ahmad is reported to have had 414 teachers who he narrated hadith from. Among the most prominent of them were, as we mentioned already, Imam Shafi'i. So Imam Shafi'i is considered one of the teachers of Imam Ahmad. Also Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, Waki' ibn al-Jarrah, Abdul Razaq ibn Hammam from Yemen. In fact, there's a story concerning Imam Ahmad and Abdul Razaq. Abdul Razaq is known for his book Musannaf Abdul Razaq. It's a compilation of athar, statements of the companions. So Imam Ahmad had traveled for Hajj to Mecca, and one of his companions who he had traveled with, they wanted to go to Yemen to meet Abdul Razak. And his companion happened to bump into Abdul Razak while they were making tawaf. So he called Imam Ahmad. He said, "Look at the qadr of Allah. Here he is. Imam Abdul Razak is right here with us. Let us benefit from him." So they arranged an appointment to meet him and sit with him and take a hadith from him. Imam Ahmad got angry, and he said to his companion that I had the intention to go to Yemen to meet the Imam Abdul Razak, and I'm going to fulfill that intention. It's not enough that we sit with him here in Mecca. We have to go all the way with him back to Yemen. And that's exactly what they ended up doing. Imam Ahmad traveled all the way to Yemen and sat with Abdul Razak and took a hadith from him. Also among the teachers of Imam Ahmad was Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Ishaq ibn Rahawayya. So these were some of the prominent scholars of hadith. Like I said, these are a few names, but these are the most famous of them. And so with this knowledge, he became a leading authority on hadith. Imam Ahmad ended up returning to Baghdad after his travels. Ibn al-Jawzi mentions in his biography of Imam Ahmad, he says, Imam Ahmad did not set himself up for the position of narrating hadith and giving fatawa until he reached the age of 40. and only after his reputation was well known throughout the Muslim world. He says his classes would be packed to the point where some narrators mention that the number who would attend to listen to him were around 5,000. But only 500 would be transcribing, writing, while the remaining would be learning from his etiquette and his manners. So this shows us the importance of seeking knowledge with scholars at the feet of scholars. This is an example of the importance of taking knowledge by visiting ulama and sitting with them. Unfortunately, in this day and age, people, they suffice with self learning and learning from the internet. Yes, it's a ni'mah, it's a blessing that we have this opportunity to learn online. However, a true student of knowledge will travel and will sit with the scholars, because there are certain things that you cannot get online through online learning, and that is, as we mentioned in this example, the etiquette and the manners of the ulama. So look here, 5,000 would be attending, only 500 would be writing. The rest would be learning from the akhlaq and the etiquette of the imam. Besides this public class that he would
Sorry, Shaykh, sorry to interrupt you. There's some brothers who are trying to get in because you're the host, Shaykh. If you can let them in.
Yeah, now, besides this public class that he would have, Imam Ahmad also had private classes with his close students, and they are those who went on to become giants of hadith themselves. So obviously, Imam Ahmad, in his public gatherings, he would be teaching hadith, but in his private circles, he would be narrating a hadith and basically giving his asanid to his close students. Among the most prominent of his students, Imam Ahmad had hundreds of students, but the most prominent among them were some of the great scholars of hadith, the likes of Imam al-Bukhari. Imam al-Bukhari was a student of Imam Ahmad. Imam Muslim, Abu Dawood. In fact, if you were to go through the Sunan of Abu Dawood, you would find many ahadith where the narration of Abu Dawood starts. He says, Haddathana Ahmad. I am narrating directly from Imam Ahmad, and he starts the chain from Imam Ahmad. Also, Imam al-Tirmidhi was his student, also An-Nasa'i. And obviously, without a doubt, his two sons. And so Imam Ahmad had two sons. They were scholars themselves. And they were Salih and Abdullah. Also, his uncle, the uncle of Imam Ahmad, Ishaq. Ishaq was his uncle. Ishaq ibn Hanbal. And also his nephew. So the nephew of Imam Ahmad, and his name was Hanbal. Finally, one last thing that we can mention concerning Imam Ahmad is his famous work that he left behind, and that is his Musnad, the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. And so a Musnad is a compilation of ahadith. It's different than a Sunan. So you have a Sunan, like Sunan Abi Dawood, Sunan At-Tirmidhi. The Sunan are compilations of hadith that are arranged by chapter, based on topics. So usually the topics of fiqh, for example, kitab al-tahara, kitab al-salah, zakah, hajj, etc. And then they have other chapters like tafsir, السيرة, al-maghazi, a chapter on aqidah, iman, etc. A musnad is arranged by chapters based on the narrator. So there would be chapters based on the names of the companions who narrated those ahadith. So all the narrations of, for example, Abdullah ibn Abbas would be one chapter. The next chapter would be all the narrations of, let's say, Abdullah ibn Umar. The next chapter would be all of the narrations of Aisha radiallahu anha, etc. So Imam Ahmad compiled his Musnad. His Musnad is well known. It is one of the leading, one of the top books of hadith that we refer to. And so Imam Ahmad started writing it when he was around the age of 36, after returning from his journey to Yemen, where he sat with Imam Abdul Razak, as we mentioned. And so from more than 700,000 ahadith, which he had collected throughout his travels, he selected only 30,000 ahadith. He selected only 30,000 ahadith, which he narrated on the authority of 283 of his teachers. Towards the end of his life, Imam Ahmad revised the Musnad with his son Abdullah. And so he revised it, edited it, removed several weak narrations. And then when Imam Ahmad passed away, it was only his son Abdullah who went on to narrate the Musnad of his father. So this is concerning the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. One last thing that we can mention is that the opinions of Imam Ahmad, his fiqh-related opinions, were recorded and noted by his students, who went on to pass it on to their students. And in this way, a school was started. A madhab had started, and that was the madhab of Imam Ahmad, which lasted until today. So when it comes to fiqh, we have four main madhab: the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa, the madhab of Imam Malik, the madhab of Imam Shafi'i, and finally the madhab of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. There were other scholars in those days who also had students who passed on, the fiqh opinions of their teachers. However, those madhabs did not last. They died out in the course of history. The likes of Imam al-Awza'i, for example, or al-Layth, and others. And Imam Ahmad, also his madhab was one of those that was about to die. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gave life to this madhab and allowed it to continue until today. And so today, it is one of the well-known madhabs that are followed. Now, there is one final thing to talk about concerning Imam Ahmad, and that is the mihna. So, what does it mean when we refer to the mihna of Imam Ahmad? A mihna is a trial, a very huge fitna, a very huge trial that basically affects everyone. And so Imam Ahmad went through a very huge trial. And so this trial was basically the issue of the Quran and what do we consider the Quran to be. Now, prior to the time of Imam Ahmad, there were people people of bid'ah, innovators, who were starting to deny certain attributes of Allah, like Allah's attribute of speech. So you had Jahm ibn Safwan, who spread this ideology, and he was eventually killed. We're talking about in the days of Bani Umayyah. But he managed to spread his ideology before he was killed, and his ideology on the sifat, on the attributes of Allah, was picked up by the Mu'tazila. So the Mu'tazila were who we can call the rationalists, those who say we have to use the intellect to understand everything. And so we don't just simply submit to whatever Allah and His Messenger have mentioned. We have to use our rationale and our intellect. And so if there is something that goes against our human intellect that we find in the Quran or in the Sunnah, then we have to reject it and we have to put forward our human intellect. This is basically the position of the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila did not have that much power initially. So in the days of Harun al-Rashid, Harun al-Rashid was the Khalifa, one of the early Khulafa of Bani Abbas, of the Abbasi Khilafah. During his days, the Mu'tazila did not have that much power. However, when his son came to power, the son of Harun al-Rashid, Al-Ma'mun, when Al-Ma'mun came to power, Al-Ma'mun was very educated in the various sciences, including philosophy. And so he ended up having close relations with the Mu'tazila. And he picked up their aqidah. And he favored it. And he made some of his close advisors to be from the scholars of the Mu'tazila. And so initially they were spreading their ideology concerning the attributes of Allah. And among their beliefs was that the Quran is something created. It is something created, and the speech of Allah is not real speech. So the speech of Allah is not real speech, but rather the Quran that was sent down by Allah is created just like everything else is created. Just like everything else is created. Whereas our belief as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that the kalam, the speech of Allah, is one of His attributes. And all of Allah's attributes are uncreated. They are a part of Allah. All of Allah's attributes are a part of Him. And no part of Allah is created. So this is the position of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the Salaf. So the Mu'tazila, now they told the Khalifa Al-Ma'mun that we are finding opposition to this position of ours from among the scholars. And so we have to now force this position on everyone. We have to use our authority and force this position on everyone. So that is exactly what ended up happening. And so Al-Ma'mun agreed. And so he acted upon this in the year 212 of the Hijrah, or in the year 218, in the year 218, and this was the year of his death. This was the year of his death, and so he sent messengers to the various cities to gather the scholars and have them acknowledge that the Quran is created. Whoever did not acknowledge, he would be punished. And so there were scholars who, caved in, and they did not want to go through any kind of punishment, any kind of hardship, and so they caved in, they buckled in, and they ended up saying, yes, the Quran is created. And among these scholars were some of the great scholars of that time. Imagine the likes of Yahya ibn Ma'in, Ali ibn al-Madini. These were some of the scholars who initially they had resisted. But then they ended up, caving into the pressure, and they ended up saying that the Quran is created. Imam Ahmad was one of the few who resisted and put up a stand and refused to cave into the pressure. And so Imam Ahmad was summoned to the Khalifa. And so he went in chains. And on the way, it so happened that the Khalifa had passed away. And so they returned Imam Ahmad back to Baghdad. And so he was saved from any kind of trial in front of the Khalifa. And he ends up returning to Baghdad, but in prison. And so he remained in prison. Now, the Khalifa after Al-Ma'mun was Al-Mu'tasim. Al-Mu'tasim, he took over after Al-Ma'mun, and he continued this same mihna, this same trial, and continued the pressure on the ulama. And so Imam Ahmad was still under a lot of pressure to admit and say that the Quran is created, and he refused. He was even threatened that they're going to kill you, but none of that, caused him to cave in to the pressure. And so Imam Ahmad was brought to the Khalifa al-Mu'tasim, and there were several scholars of the Mu'tazila who were told to argue with Imam Ahmad and convince him that, look, the Quran is created. And so they brought various evidences, and Imam Ahmad would refute their arguments in front of the Khalifa. And Imam Ahmad was told, you have to be careful. The Khalifa, he's going to lose his patience, and eventually he's gonna kill you. So eventually, nothing deterred Imam Ahmad from his position, and so he was taken. To be tortured. And so it is narrated that there were two torturers who would whip Imam Ahmed, each one taking turns at whipping him very severely, and to the point where Imam Ahmed eventually lost consciousness. He lost consciousness. He fell. He fainted, and still none of that deterred him. He would wake up from consciousness, and he would be tortured some more, and eventually they gave up and they threw him into prison. And so the Imam, he ended up in prison for approximately 2.5 years. And none of that deterred the Imam. And eventually, after a lot of public pressure, and so you could imagine that the public started to interfere. They would come to the Khalifa and demand that Imam Ahmed is released. And so he showed strength. And because of this strength that he showed and steadfastness, he gained popularity. He gained popularity. As opposed to what many people think, that the only way I can become popular is by compromising and becoming accepted by the rulers, the authority, or by the people. No, the opposite is true. Allah raises people, elevates people, because they stick to the truth. So pressure was mounting on the Khalifa to release the Imam. So eventually he was released. And he was sent home. When he reaches home, they find that he is brutally injured throughout, all over his body, on his back, on his front, even on his face. There are marks and there are several injuries. And so he was treated there. And it is mentioned that some of these marks lasted until his death. Now, after the death of Al-Mu'tasim in the year 227, Al-Wathiq took over, and Al-Wathiq continued the same suppression and continued in the way of his of the former Khulafa, Al-Ma'mun and Al-Mu'tasim, continuing the fitna and the mihna concerning the Quran being created, forcing this view on the people and on the scholars. However, Imam Ahmed was still at home, and he was banned from teaching publicly. So Imam Ahmed during this time was banned from teaching publicly. He was banned from having any kind of gatherings. So he remained at home and did not even go out for salah. He would not even go out for salah. And eventually he had to become a hostage. He had to, leave home and hide in other people's houses for the remainder of Al-Wathiq's life, reign in power. Because eventually Imam Ahmed was summoned again. He was asked to come to the Khalifa, and he didn't want to do that, so he went into hiding. Eventually, the mihna was brought to an end. And this was with the death of Al-Wathiq and his successor, Al-Mutawakkil, coming into power. And so Al-Mutawakkil becomes the new Khalifa in the year 232 of the Hijrah. And he was not like the former Khulafa, but rather he was with the scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and with the scholars of Hadith. And so he allowed Imam Ahmad to return to teaching, which is what the Imam did. He ended up coming out after all of these years, returning to teaching. Obviously, with all the popularity that he has now, his gatherings were always filled and packed. As we mentioned earlier, those numbers of thousands attending his gatherings were most likely during this period of time after the Mihna. So this is the summary of the Mihna. This is the summary of the Mihna. There are many stories that are mentioned from Imam Ahmad by his sons concerning the Mihna, but we don't have time to go through all of that. One source that one can use is this book right here called Kitab al-Mihna. Kitab al-Mihna. It is the entire story of the Mihna, narrated by Hanbal ibn Ishaq. Hanbal ibn Ishaq. He is, we mentioned earlier, he is the nephew of Imam Ahmad. The nephew of Imam Ahmad. He narrated the Mihna, the story of the Mihna. All right, so with that, we come to the end of the Mihna. We'll conclude this part of the session on the death of Imam Ahmad. And so there's a story at the time when Imam Ahmad was approaching death. And this is narrated by Abdullah, the son of Imam Ahmad. He says that when death approached my father, I was sitting with him and he began to drift in and out of consciousness. Then he opened up his eyes and he said, indicating with his hand, he said, "No, not yet. No, not yet." Abdullah says he repeated this 3 times. He repeated this 3 times. After the 3rd time, I said, "My father, what is it that you said? You fell into unconsciousness until we thought that you were gone, that you had passed away. Then you regained consciousness and you said, 'No, not yet. No, not yet.'" So Imam Ahmad, he said, "My son, do you not know? Do you not know what was happening?" And so I said, "No." And so Imam Ahmad said, "Shaitan was standing in front of me. And he said to me, 'Oh Ahmad, you have evaded me. You have escaped from me. You have won.'" The test of this life is to defeat Shaitan, our enemy. Because Shaitan, made an oath that he is going to take all of us with him to the hellfire. And so at the time of death, when there are only a few breaths remaining, Shaitan is not giving up. And so he comes to Imam Ahmad and says, "You have evaded me." And so Imam Ahmad says, Shaitan said, "You have evaded me," but I replied, "No, not yet. No, not yet. It's not over. It's not over until my soul leaves my body." And so again, what a huge lesson in, from the life of Imam Ahmad, in remaining steadfast, remaining firm and steadfast until the very last moment. Until the very last moment. Imam Ahmad passed away on a Friday uh, in the year 241 uh, of the Hijrah at the age of 77. And his janazah was attended by thousands. In fact, Baghdad had never witnessed such a large procession for a janazah before. And this reminds us of a statement of Imam Ahmad himself. Imam Ahmad had a very famous statement concerning the difference between Ahlul Bid'ah and Ahlul Sunnah, the people of the truth and the people of falsehood. How can we know who is victorious? Imam Ahmad said, tell the innovators, between us and you are the days of janazah. Meaning that the end is what proves who is victorious and who is not. Yes, today you have the upper hand. The Mu'tazila in the days of Imam Ahmad, they had the upper hand. They were victorious, in the eyes of the people. But Imam Ahmad said no. The end is what will decide. And how do we know the end? The days of the janazah. So the fact that Imam Ahmad's janazah was attended by thousands, literally thousands of people were attending. Whereas the opponents of Imam Ahmad, some of the Mu'tazili scholars, when their deaths occurred, barely anyone attended their janazas. Barely anyone attended their janazas. In this regard, we have a statement of Imam Ahmad, another statement of Imam Ahmad. Basically, some of the companions of Imam Ahmad, some of his students, said to him, when the Imam was, at home and he was not allowed to preach publicly, he was not allowed to teach publicly, he was confined to his home. They said to him, "Oh, Abu Abdullah, have you not seen how falsehood has become victorious over the truth?" So Imam Ahmad said, no. ما دامت القلوب ثابتة فالحق هو المنتصر. As long as the hearts remain firm, then the truth will be victorious. The truth will be victorious. And that's exactly what we see from the life of Imam. He remained firm and steadfast, and because of that, this trial ended. And, the Mu'tazila after that, their influence started to disappear. And, today there is no such thing as the Mu'tazili school. Yes, there are people nowadays who will try to revive the ideology of the Mu'tazila, but as a school that is followed, that has, curriculums and teachers, etc., there is no such thing. There is no such thing. So this is the life of Imam Ahmad. As I promised earlier, we have one last thing to discuss, and that is the Aqidah of Imam Ahmad on the Sifat, the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the attributes of Allah. What was his position? Now, the position of the Salaf, who Imam Ahmad was a follower of, their position on the attributes of Allah was that we affirm whatever Allah and His Messenger have mentioned of attributes. We affirm these attributes in wording and in meaning. So Allah says that He speaks, we affirm the fact that Allah speaks. Kalam is an attribute of Allah, and we affirm the meaning of that. The meaning of that is that Allah speaks. Everyone understands what it means to speak. But the position of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the Salaf is that we don't know how Allah speaks. We affirm that Allah speaks and all of Allah's attributes. For example, Allah istawa ala al-arsh. He rose over the throne. We all understand what that means. It is the apparent meaning that we are affirming, but we don't know how. We don't know how. So this is what we refer to as ithbat of the ma'na, affirming the meaning, affirming the meaning. This was the position of the Salaf, and this was the position of Imam Ahmad. Now, the Ash'a'ira, the Ash'aris, as well as the Maturidis, they claim that the position of the Salaf, and including Imam Ahmad, was that they did not affirm the apparent meanings of Allah's attributes. They affirmed the attributes, but when it came to the meanings, they said the meanings are only known to Allah. The meanings of these attributes are only known to Allah. So what we would like to do is see what was the position of Imam Ahmad. What was his position? So we have three possibilities here. The first possibility is that Imam Ahmad did ta'weel of the attributes. So ta'weel is where you say that the apparent meanings are not intended. The apparent meanings of the attributes are not intended. And we cannot leave these attributes without a meaning. So let us give a meaning to these attributes. And so ta'weel is to give them metaphorical meaning. To give them metaphorical meaning. So for example, Allah rising above the throne, al-istiwa. Fine, we believe in this attribute, but we don't believe it in the real sense. It doesn't mean that Allah actually rose above the throne. Let us give it a metaphorical meaning. So let us say that it means authority. It means Allah's authority. Or that Allah istawla. He sees the throne. So this is what we refer to as ta'weel. And ta'weel is the position adopted by the Ash'a'ira. So the later Ash'a'ira, they adopted this position. Was Imam Ahmad's position the position of ta'weel? No. So we can rule that out. If we look at the statements of Imam Ahmad, it is clear that he was not on this view. And I don't know of anyone who claims that Imam Ahmad did ta'weel. We come now to the second possibility, and that is tafweed. What is tafweed? Tafweed is to relegate the meanings, to relegate something to Allah, to say, I don't know what this is, I leave it to Allah. Now, when it comes to Allah's attributes, there are two kinds of tafweed. One is to say that Allah's attributes, we affirm that these are real attributes. So, for example, the speech of Allah, Allah speaks, and His speech is real. He speaks with letters, making words, making sentences, and with a sound, a voice that can be heard. But how Allah does that, we don't know. How exactly that is, we leave this knowledge to Allah. This is called tafweed of the kayfiyah. And this is correct. This is what we should do. But the tafweed that the Ash'a'ira claim concerning the Salaf and concerning Imam Ahmad is, they say that they left the meanings to Allah. So, for example, what does it mean that Allah speaks? We don't know. We don't know what it means that Allah speaks. We affirm that Allah speaks, but what does that mean? Only Allah knows. We relegate the meaning of that to Allah. So this is called tafweed al-ma'na. Tafweed of the ma'na, of the meaning. And this is what the Asha'ira of today, they are claiming concerning Imam Ahmad. Concerning Imam Ahmad. And this is not true, as we will see. As we will see, inshaAllah ta'ala. And so we can rule that out. And that leaves us with one final option, and that is ithbat. And that is to affirm the meanings. And when we say the meanings, we mean the apparent meanings of Allah's attributes. Ithbat al-ma'na. And this is the position of Imam Ahmad, as we will see. So, when we look at the statements of Imam Ahmad, we see that he affirms Allah's attributes. We see that he affirms Allah's attributes. Now, what will the Asha'ira hold on to try to prove that he was on the position of tafweed? There is one statement of Imam Ahmad that they will try to use. This statement is narrated by Abu Dawud. Imam Abu Dawud, his student. Abu Dawud narrates that Imam Ahmad was asked, the statement that I wanted to mention was not by Abu Dawud. Okay, so Imam Ahmad was asked about certain attributes of Allah. So, for example, Allah's nuzul, him coming down, descending to the sama of the dunya, and that Allah will be seen on the day of judgment, and other similar ahadith. He was asked about these ahadith that mention Allah's attributes. Imam Ahmad responded, he said, "We believe in them and hold them as truth, without delving into the hows or their meanings, and we do not reject any of them." We do not reject any of them. So this shows that he did ithbat. He affirmed the attributes of Allah. Now, what will the Asha'ira try to use, and the Neo-Hanbalis of today? They will use this statement of Imam Ahmad, where he says, without delving into the hows or their meanings. Without delving into their hows or their meanings. So they say, look, he is negating any kind of meaning for Allah's attributes. So how do we prove that Imam Ahmad did not negate the apparent meaning? By looking at the obvious. By looking at the obvious. And that is the mihna of Imam Ahmad concerning the Quran being created. Whoever goes through the mihna of Imam Ahmad will realize that he insisted on saying not only that the Quran is the kalam of Allah, but also that it is not created. Whereas a person of tafweed would not go beyond saying kalam Allah, and that's it. He wouldn't say that it is not created. Because when you say it is not created, you are giving a meaning. And you're delving into whether it is created or not. In fact, there were those who, in the time of Imam Ahmad, who tried to take a neutral position on this issue by saying that we're not going to get into it at all. And so Imam Ahmad, when he was asked about these people, he said they are the Jahmiyyah. They are on the position of the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah. Why? Because they are refraining from affirming the truth concerning the issue of the Quran. So there's only truth and falsehood concerning this. There is no neutral position. Moreover, Abdullah, Imam Ahmad's son, he narrates that Imam Ahmad was asked, what about those who say that the Quran is the kalam of Allah, without saying that it is not created? Without saying that it is not created. Imam Ahmad regarded them to be Jahmiyyah. And Abu Dawood also narrates that Imam Ahmad was asked, does anyone have an excuse to say that the Quran is the speech of Allah and then remain silent? Imam Ahmad said, why would he have to remain silent? If it wasn't for what the people have fallen into, meaning the mihna concerning the Quran being created, Imam Ahmad says, if it wasn't for what the people have fallen into, then he wouldn't have remained silent. Meaning, he's remaining silent because of the pressure. He doesn't want to publicly say that the Quran is not created. Imam Ahmad goes on to say, but since they, the Jahmiyyah, have already spoken, saying that the Quran is created, why would we not say that the Quran is uncreated? Meaning that the only reason why Imam Ahmad stood up and delved into this issue to prove that the Quran is not created is because of the bid'ah of the Mu'tazila, them promoting this view. If they had not, delved into whether the Quran was created or not, then we wouldn't have any reason to delve into that ourselves. And so this is a very important statement because Imam Ahmad states that if it wasn't for the fact that the Jahmiyyah denied the zahir, the apparent meaning, that the Quran is literally the speech of Allah, one may have an excuse for simply stopping and saying that the Quran is the kalam of Allah without adding not created. But when the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila denied the zahir, the apparent meanings, Imam Ahmad, obligated. He made it compulsory upon the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah to use the terms and phrases that may not be mentioned in the Quran, like whether the Quran is created or not. To emphasize the apparent obvious meanings of the text, that the Quran is literally the word of Allah and not his creation. And so how then can we say that Imam Ahmad was a mufawwid, believing in tafweed of the meanings of the attributes? Not only that, but how about Imam Ahmad affirming that Allah literally speaks with a sound, and numerous narrations, such as from his son Abdullah, who says in his book As-Sunnah, I asked my father about a people who say, when Allah spoke to Musa, he did not speak with a sound. My father replied, in fact, your Lord spoke with a sound, for we narrate these ahadith as they have reached us. Also, Al-Khalal narrates in his Sunnah that Imam Ahmad was asked, Allah is above the seventh heaven, upon his throne, separate from his creation, while his power and knowledge are everywhere. Is this true? Imam Ahmad replied, yes, he is upon the throne and nothing escapes his knowledge. So here Imam Ahmad is affirming that Allah is above his creation in the real sense. Al-Khalal also reports that Imam Ahmad was asked about someone who says Allah is not above his throne. To which Imam Ahmad replied, their entire statement revolves around kufr. And then Al-Khalal quotes Imam Ahmad saying he is upon his throne above the seventh heaven. Also, Imam Ahmad says in his book Kitab al-Sunnah regarding the hadith of al-Ru'ya, Allah being seen, he says, Imam Ahmad says, the hadith according to us is upon its apparent obvious meaning as it has come from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Delving into it is a bid'ah. Meaning, delving into, how this attribute is, it is a bid'ah. However, we believe in it as it has come upon its apparent obvious meaning, and we do not debate anyone concerning it. So in these narrations, it is obvious to anyone that Imam Ahmad articulated the zahir, the apparent meanings of the texts of the Quran and Sunnah in his own words, and that that is only possible if Imam Ahmad affirms the zahir of the texts. And so the narrations are too many to quote, and this claim that Imam Ahmad was upon tafweed is too weak to refute. But I hope the point is now clear. One final thing, coming back to the statement of Imam Ahmad that we mentioned in the beginning, that the Ash'ari and the Neo-Hanbalis today they will use, where Imam Ahmad says, Imam Ahmad says, we believe in them, the attributes of Allah, and hold them as truth without delving into the hows or their meanings. So what was Imam Ahmad negating here when he says we don't delve into the hows or their meaning, the ma'na? What exactly was he referring here? What he was referring to here was the misinterpreted meanings that the Jahmiyyah gave. The misinterpreted meanings that the Jahmiyyah gave to the attributes. And so what proves this is what we have already mentioned. The question is, why would Imam Ahmad say we don't delve into the meanings? Right? Why? Because the Jahmiyyah were giving false meanings to these attributes. So, for example, Allah rising above the throne, istawa ala al-arsh, they said it means istawla, he seized it or he took control of it. So it was these misinterpreted meanings that he was refuting. Now, naturally, Imam Ahmad's response would be, Allah rose above the throne without any meaning or without any tafsir intended by that. Right? However, because they were given false meanings to these attributes, he mentioned this statement that we don't delve into their meanings. Whatever the case, what is crystal clear from the statements of Imam Ahmad and these narrations that we have gone through is that he definitely affirmed the zahir, the apparent meanings of the attributes of Allah, and this is something that no one can deny. Also, Imam al-Dhahabi mentions in his book Al-Ulu that to negate the zahir, the apparent meanings of the attributes of Allah, it was a relatively new phenomenon invented by the later mutakallimun. It was not something that existed in the time of Imam Ahmad. And this is something very important to point out, because modern day Ash'aris claim that this was the position of the Salaf. But there is no evidence to prove that such a concept even existed in their time. This idea of tafweed, of the ma'na of Allah's attributes. And Allah knows best. So this is where we come to the end of this session. I hope it was beneficial for everyone. And whatever I have said that happened to be correct and true, it was from Allah alone. Whatever that I may have said that was incorrect, then it was from Shaitan and my own self. If there are any questions, then perhaps we can take these questions. I'll